cup of coffee, then I'll go. Thought that I'd just drop by and let you know that I'm leaving town tomorrow. I'll cause you no more sorrow. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go. I brought the money like the lawyer said to do. It won't replace all the heartaches I've caused you. It won't take the place of loving you, I know. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go.
Welcome back to the Orange Colombia channel. So soon I decided to do an election special because a lot of people have been asking me about it, and today there were a fair amount of questions. Apparently a lot of people have interest in the outcome of this election. So I'll get right to it. I'll be doing some reading, not a lot, but a little bit. Basically, the results are in. It's almost 100%. It was a relatively peaceful day, a couple little incidents, but nothing major. And let's see, it says 2 anti-establishment candidates, Gustavo Petro, a leftist and criminal, and Rodolfo Hernandez, a right-wing businessman and former mayor, captured the 2 top spots in Sunday's presidential election. See, so I'm not so crazy. I mean, that was my guess. And here's the way it broke out. John, how you doing, John? Tyson, how you doing? From Ecuador. Petro, the criminal, the socialist, got 40.3% of the vote. Now, don't panic. Hernandez, the old guy, the one that I compared to Ross Perot last week when I gave you my humble analysis of this situation, he got 28.2%. Now, considering he's only been running for this office for the past month, he came out of nowhere. And this is really good. And his platform is, I guess you would say, leans conservative, although he crosses liberal in some areas, but he's primarily conservative. But his big thing is anti-corruption. He's a fanatic about it. He's an old guy. He's in his 70s. Excuse me. And then you got Fico Gutierrez. He was the one who was handpicked to win. Consider him like a rhino, I guess, would be the best way to consider it. So he was conservative. He was handpicked by the establishment machine, and his poll numbers just plummeted over the past week and a half. He came in third at 23.9%. So that leaves 7.6%. There were 3 or 4 extraneous candidates. A couple of them got 0%. They don't really come into play here. And this would break down somewhat, maybe a little over 50% will go liberal, might possibly go towards Petro, and the other half, or maybe a little less than half, will go towards Hernandez most likely. But here's the thing. Hernandez and Fico are essentially conservative. They call them right-wing. I don't really think that's a proper way to characterize them, in my opinion. But I would say conservative. They got together 52.1% of the vote. Now, when they have the runoff election, which will be next month, June 19th, will be the next runoff election. And so when they have that election, you're going to see pretty much the FICO votes go over towards Gutierrez. Hold on here. So my guess is that it's going to be right around just slightly over 50% for Hernandez, the conservative guy. And Petro will pick up some, maybe even close to 50%, but the winner will be whoever goes over 50%. And so that's what my guess is. Now we got a few weeks before it comes around. Who's to say, what's going to happen for sure. But I've had this kind of, the portrayal I gave last week on this was actually contrary to what most people here thought was going to happen. But I don't know, it seemed kind of clear to me. But I think it's maybe because this Hernandez really came up out of nowhere. I mean, he's a known figure, but running for president, I mean, he just wasn't doing it. He didn't participate in any of the debates. He mostly did social media, but primarily he ran on what people already know of him. He's been in the public eye for a long time. He's also a businessman. So now, I said last week the comparisons to Trump didn't really fit the election model. That was more because of the way things split up. So I portrayed it the way that I did last week. But now it kind of comes into play where you can look at it and it's like one against the other. And you got a businessman he's not filthy rich, but he's not poor. And he's in his 70s. So he does speak his mind. Steps on his tail once in a while. Some pretty funny ones, like when he tried to compare. He tried to associate himself with Einstein, and he misspoke and said Hitler. One of those German guys. But I think the comparison really ends there because he's not filthy rich, and he's got political experience, which Trump didn't have. So I think it's more of a convenient comparison. I really think Ross Perot kind of fits a little bit better. But anyway, we've got here, I want to read something here. Okay, it says two anti-establishment candidates, Gustavo Petro, a leftist and a criminal, and Rodolfo Hernandez, a right-wing populist, captured the top two spots in Colombia's presidential election on Sunday, today, now, delivering a stunning blow to the country's dominant conservative political class. The two men will compete in a runoff election on June 19th, shaping up to be one of the most consequential in the country's history. At stake is the country's economic model, its democratic integrity, and livelihoods of millions of people pushed into poverty during the pandemic. There haven't been numbers of how many people flipped into poverty during pandemic until just this past month. And it's pretty frightening. The poverty percent prior to the pandemic, and I actually talked on it at one point, I did a video on it, was 20, I think it was around, give or take a percent, about 27% were below the poverty line. Well, it within a couple percent, within a percent or two, it's at 40% now after the pandemic. It's 39 point something. And that's a massive jump. I guess, with all the businesses that went out and all the lockdowns that we had and all that, I shouldn't be surprised. I was surprised to see that it was that much. Colombia has been worse off. When I lived here before, it was over 50%. But that's a breeding ground for a lot of problems that need to be addressed quickly and be cleaned up. And this is not just a Colombia issue. This is everywhere. Tyson, you said you're in Ecuador. you know what I'm speaking of. There's all kinds of issues happening in Ecuador that really come out of the aftermath of the pandemic. The Petro Hernandez face-off, a Colombian political scientist says it pits change against change. Yeah, being both anti-establishment type of guys, except the change are drastically different. The day was largely peaceful as millions of Colombians voted despite growing interest in parts of the country that have seen a resurgence of armed groups. And I want to talk about that, but I won't tonight. But there has been a resurgence in numbers. It's not massive, but in territory. I mean, they're still not in the cities, but it's definitely concerning. In a nation where vote buying and threats on election day are not uncommon, the Electoral Observation Mission, a network of civil society organizations, said it received 17 reports of vote buying and 13 instances of pressure from private companies to vote for certain candidates. The military also found 2 improvised explosive devices, one roughly 300 feet from a voting station. Now, none of those things are good, but with a population of this size, having that, that's a vast improvement over the past. But they've really been preparing for this. You know, I mentioned today, just here in Condillo, there's 1,500 police on duty. While the polls are open, you had 3,500 extra military brought in to keep the peace and keep their eye out for things. Nothing actually happened. So there were a couple IEDs, but none went off anywhere. They were discovered. If Petro wins the runoff election next month, he'll become Colombia's first leftist president ever. A watershed moment for a nation that's long been led by a conservative establishment. His rise reflects not just a leftist shift across Latin America, but also an anti-incumbent fervor, that's primarily what it is, that has gained strength as the pandemic has deepened poverty and inequality, intensifying feelings that the region's economies are built mostly to serve the elite. Little bias in this, you have to understand the New York Times, I'm reading an article they wrote, but there is a leftist ideology belief by basically young people, because the universities have been running brainwashing programs for some time. But the issue actually is primarily more to do with anti-establishment. It has more to do with lost faith in the government that exists and wanting to mix things up. And that's the majority of it. So, I got high hopes of where this is going to end up. Do you think expat visa will be more difficult to get depending on who gets elected? No, I don't. One of the things that Petro has said, and he would be worst case situation. So where does he stand on this? Well, one of the things that he has said is that he wants to get a lot more money from tourism than exists now. He thinks there's a lot of money that could be had for the country on tourism. Sadly, he wants to, Colombia is self-sufficient with their fossil fuel economy. And he's like all the other nutcases in the world that think, that economies can run without oil. And so in his speeches, he envisioned lessening the demand for oil or lessening the use of oil, but increasing tourism. I don't even know how that plays in. I mean, tourists come here on airplanes, but that aside, he's he's somewhat passionate about tourism. So would he make it more difficult to get visas? No, I don't see that happening. Plus, you have to understand this is a representative government, it's a republic. So it's not like he can come in and just, you know, change the laws. He can propose things, but he's got to have enough people on his side. And, you know, so that'll be problematic. That'll certainly slow him down until the next election comes around. But I personally think this old guy's I think he's gonna get it. As long as he stays alive, you know, I really think he's gonna get it. Hold tight. Hold on a minute here. Petro has vowed to transform Colombia's economic system, which he says fuels inequality. He wants to expand social programs, halt oil exploration, and shifting the country's focus to domestic agriculture and industry. Well, if they halt oil exploration, it won't hurt oil as it stands because they've got pretty good reserves to work off of now. That's a future issue, but Colombia has also been a United States' strongest ally in the region, and Petro is calling for a reset of the relationship, including changes to the approach to the drug war and re-examination of a bilateral trade agreement that could lead to a clash with Washington. Now, the crazy thing is this bilateral trade agreement is the reason we're getting all these things without those taxes, which wasn't the case a few years ago. And it's something that has hurt Ecuador because they had those taxes and they've been falling away. There's less tax on items now going into Ecuador than used to be, but it's not like here. Here I can buy things just like if I were sitting in New York and buying it there. So that would definitely be bad news. But again, he's not being elected king, and there'll be a lot of representatives that are going to have to be convinced one way or the other. And he's not, even if he wins, he would be winning by the skin of his teeth. And so, you know, when you have a landslide, you have a lot of people pile on board. But when somebody wins by the skin of their teeth, you have to remember he's already run a couple times and lost. So I don't see a lot of people jumping on his bandwagon. Voters are fed up with rising prices, high unemployment, low wages, rising education costs, surging violence, and polls show that a clear majority of Colombians have an unfavorable view of the current president, Duque, who is largely regarded as part of the conservative establishment. Now, the thing about Duque is, was he good or was he bad? Flip a coin. He did some good things. He did some stupid things. All in all, he's just the run of the mill. He wasn't anything horrible. But there has been a propaganda campaign against him for 4 or 5 years. A steady drumbeat about how terrible he is. Just repeating things over and over and over. And it definitely hurt him. And I believe that's the reason that Fico actually, you know, had to fall out of the race at 24%, because that party has such a bad name from the bad propaganda. But people here are generally conservative, and I think that's why this old guy, when he got in the race, he's not part of the establishment. It gave them somebody to turn to. And that's why I honestly think, you know, that it's going to end up with him winning. But we'll know June 19th. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Anything else here important? No, I think that's it. There's other information here, but this article starts off being pretty factual, and then all the rest of it is really kind of slanted politically. Like I said, it's the New York Times. You can't really expect much different. But it was in English. I didn't have to try to translate it, and the parts I read to you were pretty accurate. So that's it. That's where we stand with the election. I know some of you are interested. I did it live because there's no point in doing it and having to edit. So it's live, errors at all if I made any, and it's here. So those who are interested who didn't see this, can watch it tomorrow. John, you always have an interesting perspective. Thank you. I actually take time to try to understand these things before I talk about them. There's a lot of things I don't know about, but if I'm going to talk about it, I actually do some homework on it. And I knew the election was going to be a concern. I've done a lot of reading, looked at a couple speeches to kind of get the gist of it. And it seemed, I think everything that I was looking at just reminded me so much of the Bush Clinton election, and so that helped lead me to the assumption that I had. In the U.S., Ross Perot caused Bush to lose, but in the U.S., we have one vote. Here, if you don't hit the 50%, you have a runoff. If you had that in the United States, what would have happened? Well, if Ross Perot fell out of the race and they had another vote a month later, all those Ross Perot votes would have gone to Bush. Clinton never would have been elected. And I see that as the model of what I've been looking at for the last couple of weeks here. And so that's how, I don't know, we'll see if it holds true. They'll have to just based on the numbers of who voted today, there will have to be some major political shift in order for Petro to win. We'll probably see some propaganda campaign running, but I don't know. Time will tell. So that's it. That's all I got. Anybody have a question before I sign off? I'm still trying to lose my voice today. Thank you for the update. Please appreciate all you do. Emil, how many days? What do you got? Like 9 days? 8 days? 10 days? Something like that? And let's see, where am I picking you up? At Medellin, is it? Bogota? I forget where I'm picking you up. Yeah, did you send me your flight plan? I think you did. I'll have to go look. It was a while ago. Thanks for the live stream. All right, we're gonna end it here. I seem to be losing my voice. All right, we'll see you guys next Sunday. Ciao.
Okay.